All right, we're recording September 30. This is office hours for service APIs. We are really knocking items out here. Harry, it looks like you had a couple things at the top of the agenda, starting with this issue. Yeah, you want to give some background?
No, so yeah, I'm sort of paging through why I put those in. I think this was more about users asking for some features that I don't think we are adding in yet. And so this one was about allowing regexes inside the host name field. I think that's what users are trying to do. And I think we do not document anything like that here. Where so right now we don't have any validation of on the host name field. So no, somebody in custom API surface can probably do that, but we don't prevent from doing that. Is that sufficient? Like if Nginx, go ahead.
Wouldn't our, well, no, you're right. We don't really have any, And the comment below is a good one, that this would certainly complicate any kind of conflict resolution here.
Yeah, I mean, once you put in regex, conflict resolution gets really hard.
Yeah.
And you also have to define what regex, what standard you're supporting. And if you're not explicit about that, that can be really confusing.
Yeah, I mean, right now our pattern elsewhere where we've used regex is that it is not portable, and it depends on the implementation's regex implementation. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it is like Ingress v1 beta 1 defined the regex to be POSIX. That already caused issues. So Ingress v1 removes the type of regex.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's how we are following it in service APIs as well.
Well, yeah, except we technically do have a regex type somewhere, which is similar to implementation specific, but maybe slightly different. So.
Yeah.
I mean, you can deal with this with a custom controller as well. I mean, it could be a fair bit of work, but you can have a custom controller which targets some set of services by label and then generates a host name rule with for your service APIs with a, expanding some pattern that you know about.
Yeah. I mean, you can actually use Nginx to do this today. You can also do, I think you can also use Kong to do a similar thing like this today as well. So you users want like this in addition of like whatever they want to do with regular Ingress. Like this is a very specialized use case. But I think the reason I added it in here was like, we don't define it. So it would be like an undefined API surface. And if somebody wants to do it, they can do it, right? Or should we prohibit from doing, like consider prohibiting this?
Well, the only way to do it would be with a custom route type, correct?
I see. So we can't, you can't do this with HTTP route, you mean to say? You should not, or like we advise against it?
Isn't this violate the host validation for sure?
There is no host validation except min and max, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little we can do with what we have with just KubeBuilder tags.
Oh yeah, but we shouldn't. I mean, you can certainly write text and then add a webhook and stuff. Like we're not limited to that.
Sure. So your preference here would be to solve this at least initially by writing text to say we don't support
Yeah, we should be doing that anyways. I don't, QBuilder is such a weak validation
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. Okay. And I believe in Ingress v1, we supported wildcard host names, which seems like maybe not that much of a stretch, but that's still several levels below a regex host.
Yeah, this regex with the capturing, it feels quite specific.
Does wildcard feel like something we should support here, though?
That one makes more sense just because it wasn't Ingress and we added it, and it seems to be reasonably limited. I think we could even debate whether it goes in alpha or we just tack it on like immediately afterwards, just from time perspective. But this one is pretty complicated because it's not only a regex with a capture, also there's a substitution, like, you know, this
Yeah,
is
that gets
pretty
Right.
Yeah, that's
specific.
yeah. But maybe let's add it to V1 Alpha 2 and then see what our stand is on this issue and try to move this issue forward.
I think I agree with that. I think it would be good to add some kind of documentation for V1 Alpha 1 for hostname, just so it's a little bit more clear what is and is not accepted. I think we're pretty vague on what can be allowed here.
We can add a regex for that. So, I mean, a host name is a DNS name or star.dns name.
That's some irony, but yes, that is a good solution here. Use a KubeBuilder regex validation is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we
Sure.
only support 2 cases, right?
Yeah. James, do you want to volunteer to follow up with this one?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I think you had one more thing on the list, Harry. Oh yes, I'm going through our milestone. I feel like we just keep on adding things. I know I have done that a lot. I think this one and this one are going to be solved by the API cleanup PR. At least that's the intention of that PR. I opened a PR just this afternoon to solve this one. I think this is a really tiny one, right, Harry?
Yeah, that's a tiny one. I need to get around to
Okay.
it.
Okay, good. Lots of documentation ones here. Yeah, at some point it would be good to just, if anyone is feeling like they have a bit of time to spare, if you want to just assign yourself to one of these issues, please do, by all means. These documentation pages would be really great to get updated. I think our API is starting to stabilize here.
Yeah, can we figure out if it's possible to set up a schedule where we start cutting like RC1, RC2 equivalents, where that snapshot is something that we're actually going to send for reviewers for an overall review?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because right now we're doing it on a tiny thing by tiny thing basis, but then as those merge and we are asking for broader review, we should cut like RC1 so there's like a stable snapshot that people can refer to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to clarify, would these release candidates be purely for the API or would they include documentation?
I think they're only meaningful really for the API, although if you had the
Okay.
documentation that's like not aligned with the API, probably it's confusing, but mostly if the documentation is in some kind of middle state, that's okay. The thing we're really pointing to people to would be the API.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. How would we determine that we were ready to, tag a release candidate?
I think we should set a deadline for ourselves and then try to do it
Okay.
on a weekly basis.
Okay. That seems reasonable. Should
Like, what
we
about
try?
this week, maybe
Yeah.
end of this week?
Like the sound of that.
Okay. And the definition of a release candidate would really just be tagging a commit in GitHub, right? You know, like pushing a tag up that is v1 alpha 1 rc1.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that seems very reasonable. I would hate to be the one to, you know, for anyone to unilaterally make that decision. Maybe if we just have a time every week where we send out a new release candidate based off whatever's in master at that point.
How about
That,
let's discuss it tomorrow at the
Okay.
top, and then see if at the end of tomorrow we are okay, or maybe if there's a couple things we want to get in, then sometime on Friday, right?
Yeah.
And then we can make this like a every week, or I would say every week. Let's just try to make progress.
What is your expectation for review? What do you think people would do with a release candidate?
Oh, it's just a snapshot so people can look at. Basically, right now, it's like some pieces might be still a little bit to do or not cleaned up. I would say for the RC that everyone has read through it and made sure that there's nothing egregious that's still like, there's like some dangling to do somewhere that hasn't been committed or is like part of the discussion. Just so that if someone wanted to read it front to back, it would be in a consistent state.
Okay, that makes sense. I was curious about if you wanted to do an RC every week, then that seems like you have some expectation.
To me, at least, a release candidate seems like it could be a helpful way for anyone that is starting to work on an implementation of this API. It seems like it would be nice to have just a release candidate to base that off of as we start to stabilize, instead of just some kind of commit hash at some point. Yeah, I don't know. Anyone else have feedback or ideas on release candidate? Okay, cool. Well, we can discuss a bit more tomorrow, but yeah, that seems like a great idea.
Rob, I think tomorrow's October 1st, not September 31st.
You know, thank you. I just, this month, just, you know, didn't want it to end. Thank you. All right, so yeah, we've got a few things for documentation, really all the things, it seems like. More documentation. Have we resolved this already? Maybe we haven't. Some of these look like.
I resolved that in the PR for which added extensions refs to gateway.
Okay, so we can close this.
Well, assuming that we.
Oh,
it is.
I see. I got, yeah.
It seems like we don't have consensus on
Yeah, okay. Yeah, got it.
Hey, Rob,
All right.
do you mind providing some more information about that feedback page? It's
Yeah.
issue 334.
Yeah. So the
I looked
feedback.
into it a little bit. Sorry, go ahead. You got it.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I tried to make an issue and it seemed like we already kind of had that general flow. And I started going down the path of like trying to think of different interesting ways that we would want to track things. I think it's probably too early, but I think there is some interesting opportunities to like auto classify, I guess, as we start to scale out from gateway, all these different route types, like on the triage side of things down the road. some help in that area. But I guess what was like this phase of the intent, perhaps, to help?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. I appreciate you asking and volunteering to take this one on. I think the biggest thing is we have a big to-do block here. So removing that is, a great starting point. We already have issue templates on GitHub, so I don't think we really need to recreate those issue templates here. My preference would be to keep this relatively minimal and maybe describe the kinds of issues that you can create on our GitHub repo.
Like, probably the thing that makes the most sense is to basically have a simple, like, I have a bug or I have a feature request, and just click through here to just go to the GitHub page to file that automatically with the appropriate template. And that's what we need.
Oh, I see. Like, instead of it just being straight to this, like each of these get started already kind of like,
yeah,
go
or
here.
just bounce to this page.
Yeah, I think a link
Okay.
directly here is probably fine. I think our feedback page does not need, I'd hate for, as an example, our feedback page to list out every issue type and then somehow get stale because we added or changed issue types and didn't update them on the feedback page.
Yeah, okay, I got you. So just keep it light, get that Slack channel and that page right there. Okay, makes sense.
I think that would be perfect.
Rob, can you stay there for a second? And
yeah,
I know we discussed this a little bit yesterday. Or not yesterday, last week, where we talked about documentation and maybe taking a step back and just kind of looking and assessing kind of the overall structure of our documentation. And this may be kind of a good example here where, is feedback part of how to contribute, right? That is actually a way to contribute. So if we look at feedback here and if we leave it as is, it's going to be a page that has very minimal content. If we now click on how to contribute, do you mind clicking there really quick? And let's just see what we have there.
Yeah.
Do we think that maybe just actually taking that feedback and putting that as a section on how to contribute? I don't know what people think about that.
That makes sense to me, as long as it's discoverable by users. So we should just make it at the very top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. We can also, it is very easy. I don't know if we want to make feedback this prevalent, but it's very easy to add another link up here. So if we wanted to have a feedback link here that went directly to this, that
I like that idea.
Might not be bad.
Yeah, I like that idea. And to Bowie's point, making it very clear in the user space and how to provide feedback. So that's a good idea as well.
Cool. Okay. Well, maybe both of those. I do think how to contribute, having some basic information here about giving feedback is great. And maybe for bonus points, a link up top if it's not too hard. It's been a while since I messed with this. I'm the one who added the GitHub link, and I think, but I can't remember. It seemed not too bad, but it's been a while. So, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Good. Good suggestion. I'll probably try to just pile that all into that same one then, removing this, having the top, and if that's all good with you guys.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate the help here.
Yeah, thanks for the direction.
Cool.
And Rob, since we're on the discussion topic, I don't know if we want to do it if we have time today, but
yeah,
it may actually be nice as a group that we kind of just click through these different areas and kind of, just get a feel for the overall flow and jump back to the specific issues. Because again, it just seems like maybe with all of our eyes on this, that we could get a feel if the current structure makes sense and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I think this is a reasonable first start. This is just my own take on this. It does feel like we could use a little bit more of an introduction here than we have right now. Like it's straight into all this additional things. I don't know that we need much more than this, but this feels like a potential area of improvement. Okay.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting was I saw that we have examples. I'd like to figure out how to automatically throw them in the cookbook. Maybe I can take that on, because I would like to not have to cut and paste from the examples back to the cookbook and then back and forth.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
I was going to say, and instead of cookbook, I mean, is it just maybe examples, and then you click there, and it just takes you to the examples directory of the repo, or maybe maybe it takes you to the examples page, and we have kind of the breakdown of the examples where it's like, okay, for HTTP route, or maybe a few different examples, but it seems like we already have those as examples there, and it's just a matter of pointing people to them. Unless am I missing something?
I think we could maybe add a little bit of description around each example, but if you could embed, literally just this as a reference and then describe what's happening here.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Probably either your direct thing, Danian, or some little wrapper that kind of just sends it back to the examples. There must be a easy way to do this.
Yeah,
I think even just from like a naming standpoint, instead of calling it a cookbook, just the examples, so we have kind of the consistency with the naming as well would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, we do want a little bit of text to like walk people through it, because I know that when I look at examples, sometimes you're just like dumped in the sea of examples, and it's a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, and so maybe that's
absolutely.
the approach where, like, we have the examples section, and like you said, right, we kind of look at these instead of just pointing everyone, hey, here's our examples. As you mentioned, Bowie, is like we on the docs web page, we've got an examples section, and we kind of look through here and say, okay, is there a way to kind of group these? And if we group them, maybe it makes sense by like gateway class, gateway, almost like a user workflow example. But I don't know. I do think the more I think about it and we talk about it, it does make sense instead of just pointing people at these examples, that we have some text and see if we can't maybe organize these examples into a few example workflows.
Yeah, I agree. I think I had cookbooks here. I do think I prefer examples. This is a tiny thing. And let me go ahead and just change this briefly. Yeah, we've already had such an issue keeping our examples up to date. I can't imagine trying to keep docs up to date.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And if Bowie said he was taking it on, I'm not sure if this is already assigned to Bowie, but if not, maybe you want to.
Does not look like it. Are you good with that, Bowie?
Yeah, I'm going through some of the test things. I know we had a demo for CNCF, so I'm going to go over that.
Okay. Let's see. I've already got a PR that should hopefully solve this one. James, I don't know if we've discussed this issue yet. Patch types for conditions.
No, I don't think we discussed it in a call. So this is the annotations that you're kind of supposed to put on condition slices to make them work like maps with.
Yeah.
So you get one condition per key, per condition type. So yeah, I think you pointed out on the review that this doesn't actually change the CRD. So
yeah.
That's a little bit interesting. So I think we still want to have the same semantics. We want to have these semantics, but I'm not sure that there's a way to enforce that through CRD generation, or whether the primary KK generators do something different.
Yeah.
So it probably requires me to do a bunch of groveling through repos and to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, and I saw some of this, Rob, with your API cleanup PR, where it's like the gateway conditions have these annotations along with some of the defaulting, but I didn't see that in like the listener conditions and some of the other conditions, and I just kind of pose that as a question if we should have that consistency across the board.
As in a default condition being set?
Well, the default and having some of these other annotations that James points out here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is good. I don't, the concern about these annotations is if they're not doing anything, it might give the appearance of effectiveness, even if, there's nothing happening behind the scenes. Yeah, I don't know what the status is here, but
and
I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm for that too. Like, if they're not doing anything, then I would say let's remove them off of the gateway conditions. I guess the point I'm trying to make is just like having that consistency. So when we look at the conditions, and like, unless there's a reason why they're not consistent, otherwise someone may come across and say, well, why is this condition have different behavior? Gateway status condition have different behavior than a listener condition.
So I think the semantics of condition slices, I agree, should be the same everywhere. In the absence of any way to enforce those semantics, we can just document it and cross our fingers. Though one way to document it is to add these annotations.
So as a way of documenting intent, not so much what is possible quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's not possible. The Kubi Builder documentation says that list map key, for example, is a thing it does.
Right.
It's listed as supported, so I'm not quite sure why it doesn't seem to do anything.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, worth looking into a bit more for sure.
But yeah, I should try to prioritize making some progress on that, because I agree with I think Danyan that it's important for us to be consistent there.
Yeah. All right. So gotten this far down. What else have we not covered yet? Harry, this Regexis support for path and header matching.
Yeah, I think it's a doc update that I have to get around to.
Okay.
This was also, I think there is some feedback from, I think Tim and Dan as well. So I think, yeah, I know what to do here. I just haven't got around to it.
Okay, cool. So this is more documentation than actually a change.
Right.
Okay. What did oh, this is the naming, right? Where some fields have selector in the name and some don't.
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. I think I have one that will solve this one. I just need to link the two together. Gateway and gateway class, just another documentation one. Yeah, this is straightforward. Straightforward. James, I think you're working on this.
I think the questions were around module vendoring.
Okay.
I think John had a question about whether mod equals vendor was what we actually wanted. And I think Bowie had a question about whether we really should force the modules to be populated. Not sure I have good answers to either of those, apart from poking at it a bit more. The problem with the vendor directory is that you either kind of have it, well, you either don't have it, or you have it fully populated, or you have it out of sync with the Go modules.
Right.
So maybe at least one of those is going to break you. Potentially two of those cases are going to like not work for different people's configs. I don't know about readlink. That's just how I do it. So Bowie, that's just how I always do it when I need the full path. And I need the full path to make a symlink.
I'll play with your change. Usually it's a bad idea to like have build change files. At least we should have it gate ignored, because doesn't it change version controlled files? I know we deleted vendor.
No, vendor isn't version controlled, but we could add it to a git ignore if people want that.
Like it's ideal that, for example, make clean just cleans everything, and even though it's downloading into vendor, you're not like it's clear to the someone down, you know, with the repo that's it's just not, those files are to be ignored.
Yeah, I'll see whether I can make it work without vendor. Honestly, the amount of stuff that sometimes uses vendor in the Go ecosystem is super weird. And I find that in Goland for code indexing, it really, really likes me to have vendor. But lots of things, other things in Go, in using Go modules will seem to use the cache and not really require you to populate vendor. So I don't know.
Yeah, that is fun. Thank you for taking this one on. Yeah, it'd be good to have this a little bit, a little less finicky. I think that's all for what we have left in V1 Alpha 1, at least right now. Let me.
Hey Rob, can you click on
yeah.
the chat window? This, even though it's not V1 Alpha 1, I just wanted to kind of maybe take a quick poll of what people think with renaming matches to match. And it just, you know, looking through the examples, I think it was in your APIs cleanup PR, or the flattening the host name. It's like, I just, as I read through kind of the spec, I'm like, it just seems like it reads better this way, even though, match would still be a plural. And I appreciate your comment. It looks like, there's examples for using matches as well as match, but wanted to open up for a quick discussion.
Yeah, I'll just echo my comment earlier that I don't mind this change. The idea between match becoming singular is that it feels inconsistent with host names being plural right above it, and host name singular feels especially strange to me. On the other hand, forward to is an example of something that is singular that also is the name of the list. So those are the two examples I think we could argue one way or the other in the route type. I don't feel strongly enough on this one to argue one way or another, but I'm also very open to feedback or thoughts from anyone around this.
And I could argue either ways. What the way I'm thinking is like forward to is singular, but it's singular because it represents sort of, I mean, it's a verb and match is also a verb, but it represents where to forward traffic to, one service, 10 services. So that's why it's singular. Not everything takes effect, effect at the same time. In case of match and matches, I mean, matches probably give you, like this is probably my brain thinking this way, but matches tell me that each and every match is independent, right? Since in the example we have right now, we have a path of prefix bar, right? No, that's not a good example. The next example we have, right? Headers of exact matching and then a path of prefix match. They are ANDed together, but if you have multiple matches, they are independent. That's way too specific for, subjective, I think. That's way too subjective. So yeah, I lean towards matches.
That is a great point. The distinction between whether you would interpret this as an and or an or. I had not thought of that perspective. Okay, well, if anyone else wants to add feedback here, or Daniel, did you have anything else?
No, I think I'll just kind of let this sit, and it's obviously not pressing, but it's just something that caught my eye and wanted to open it up for discussion. So thanks for that.
Cool. And speaking of something like that is not necessarily pressing, but is interesting, Tim got a chance to look through at least part of this doc again, and so he's left some comments on our pre-alpha review. It's a really long doc. We have a big API, it turns out. I think it turns into 40 some pages. One of the things that came up pretty quickly is he is not sold on even the revised allowed gateway namespaces, which this field or this concept is continuing to be a challenge. He is trying to get some people together from different SIGs like SIG storage, SIG auth, etc. to get their perspectives as well, and storage specifically because of the storage class prior art. So ongoing there, but these were these are the comments he left. What was it? Friday, September 28th. Yeah, I think that's Friday.
Hey, Rob,
so,
with that point, and since Micaiah is on, last time we discussed this, Micaiah, didn't you kind of bring up a different approach, just using RBAC?
Yeah. And I think, yes, I think we absolutely need to explore that further. Yeah.
Yeah, I spent some time on a proof of concept admission controller. I don't have it working yet, though.
Okay.
Yeah, there's also, apparently you can do this with quota, but not with this specific thing. So the other one is runtime class, is another class, well, has class in the name, but that one is in SIG node. So it seems to be cross-cutting.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been recent discussions in SIG auth around namespace labels and their security, and I don't know. There's a lot of movement in this space, and no one seems to like anything. That's my take. So I don't know. I'm interested in who we can get together and what kind of feedback we get from other SIGs on this.
So one thing with that, with Tim's suggestion to use OPA, what we started doing in Contour project is providing examples with gatekeeper configuration. And so the idea is that people can install, here's some standard policies that people using, this API can install. So
yeah.
Gatekeeper also has a library repo, and I think the idea behind that is to try and build like a general corpus of checks and balance checks that people can run.
Yeah, I mean, the more we push forward on this and then push back and so on, the more I am wondering if this is something that needs to be part of V1 Alpha 1. Like it is a good concept, but this field does not have to be implemented by us. Like this, it would be great if we could do it natively, but there are lots of webhook implementations like Gatekeeper, OPA, that can solve this and kind of leave it as someone else's problem, at least initially. I don't want to give up quite that easily.
I mean, Rob, I'm not so sure about that, because OPA, you can literally do anything, can't you?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, then like, why not replace all of RBAC with OPA?
Yeah, right. I mean, it is always better to have a native solution than not. Though actually, I think it was KubeCon San Diego, the SIG auth update, there was a whole bunch of discussion about making OPA a more standard concept. And yeah, anyway, so I don't know.
So I think the main thing though is that we definitely want to be able to give users some way to enforce these role-based things. It's okay, I guess, if it's OPA, but we have to arrive at the alpha with that capability. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to test it.
Yeah. It can be. Yeah, it can be some other capability.
What I mean is, like, for alpha, we definitely need something. We can't just remove it.
Sure. Yeah.
But what would that be? Like, do we want to come up with the short list? Because it has to arrive for alpha.
No, yeah, sure. I agree with that. And this is not me giving up on this field. This is just saying that, depending on what we get in terms of feedback from SIG auth, from SIG storage, from whoever else.
Rob, but like, we do have to cut alpha soonish. So I would rather be able to test this concept at the very least without having to punt it completely, because otherwise then we get absolutely no feedback on it.
Sure. You know, I think the other side of this is by adding something like we're not sure. I mean, there's a balance, right? If we add something that we don't love, then we remove it in the future, and that causes, you know, backwards incompatibility.
But
You
it's
know, like
alpha.
that. It is alpha.
Putting too much, like you're thinking of like a beta or a GA API.
Well, I mean, even you know, in upstream, even alpha, it is hard to make huge breaking changes. I don't know.
That's
I
not
mean, I know it
true. Like
happens, but
things have gotten majorly renamed and moved around
yeah,
from alpha. Like we are removing topology, for instance.
yeah, but it's
But
unclear. Yeah,
let's
that's a whole other thing.
I was going to say, if it's in here, people use it, and people kind of build their mental model around, okay, this is how you secure things, as opposed to not having it in there and kind of leaving it open for, like, out in the wild for people to see if they could come up with ideas on how to solve the problem. And then as there's a consensus around ways to solve that problem, then we bring it in.
What I would like though is to have some way to solve the problem, right? Like if we just punt it completely, then there's no way to solve the problem. So if we have some simple cookbook that we can follow to kind of solve the problem, I just want it there for alpha so people are able to play with it and kind of understand it. Otherwise we get no information, and then I feel like that is sort of a worse result.
Well,
Okay.
maybe this is kind of a way forward that's reasonable, is we keep it in now. It sounds like Micaiah is making progress on an idea that, right, using RBAC that we've discussed and we think is is a valid approach. And let's see if Micaiah is able to get to a point that we can really assess just using RBAC. And if that's the case,
Yeah.
I think that gives us a little more flexibility, that if something else comes along, we could always pivot away from RBAC easier, right?
Yes, I just want to make sure that we're getting it in front of users and testing it, because if we don't, then we're not really getting any feedback. Like the next time we add it in, it's not gonna, we wouldn't be having new information about it.
Yeah, no, it's I like that idea, and you do bring up a point that it's like, okay, even if we remove it down the road, I mean, this is alpha, and so implementers are just going to have to expect that there's going to be potentially some big changes still occurring.
Okay. Yeah, we can. Yeah, I'm very interested in the RBAC approach. I know this one still has some issues. Hopefully, we can get some consensus around an approach for alpha at least. There are a few other comments. I don't know that we have time for all of them. This is one interesting one that we should add some kind of bullet to describe how we would support additional protocols. This is kind of a bigger issue, but I thought it was an interesting comment. Assuming we want to support more protocols than this in the not too distant future, describing what that would look like here. And yeah, there's a bunch more, but I know we have more to go through as far as PRs and issues. So if you want to look through these comments on your own, I linked it in the agenda, and I think at least someone else is looking at it now. So I added a couple PRs today. I'm not anticipating getting through all of them, but this specific one was already covered this. Yeah, this specific one was added based on some of the feedback that Tim added in that doc. And it also is based on some feedback from Harry of only same namespace being less than ideal. I don't know if this is the appropriate pattern, but it uses the same pattern we used for route gateways and replaces the only same namespaces bool with an enum, like a from string instead. And so your options would be from selector or from same namespace. This seems like it gives us a lot more flexibility going forward. It allows us to, in the future, say we have a namespace list instead of a selector. Maybe that's a thing. I think a really obvious point of extension that I almost added here would be a from anywhere option. Technically, you can accomplish that with from selector and then empty selector. So I left that. But I think from anywhere is a very obvious next step.
What does from anywhere mean?
Any namespace.
Oh, I see.
This is in the concept of route namespaces.
I see.
Or so, yeah, so maybe any namespace would be clear. But some kind of all option. But again, this is the simplest way to model what we have right now.
Isn't that
and I think it
duplicative of the selector, the nil selector?
It is.
Or
It is.
We're doing it because from a usability perspective?
We were not. So the only options I added right now are selector and same namespace. I was just saying if we wanted to extend it, we could add an any namespace option that would just be a shortcut. But it is already easy to communicate that with selector and empty selector. Just maybe a little less intuitive.
Right. Yeah, isn't this the recommendation for most bool fields, is to use the bool field, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, so that is that change. This and another PR I made today are based on this API cleanup PR. There's just so many fields changing in this API cleanup PR. I didn't feel like rebasing on top of it. I know that may be short-sighted, but because of that, this is what it is right now. I think the API cleanup PR is super close to getting in.
So I had a question about the API. You saw my comment at the bottom. You added a bunch of maxes to a bunch of lists. Like,
yep.
How does that impact backwards and forwards compatibility if we kept it in? I know it's alpha, but like for lists where we're not super clear on, like there's no obvious cap except for the object will get extremely big. I'm wondering about adding maxes there, especially since some of the numbers are quite small.
So this actually came as part of Tim's first feedback, where he suggested adding a max wherever we could, and less important, min wherever it made sense. But the rationale is if you don't have a max, it's very hard to know the upper limits of your API. And to, a really obvious glaring example is if there's no max on string length, then okay, are people going to write a book in there? Like what is that limit? For his guidance, as I remember it, was to keep it, and I tried to write this in the doc where I summarized that first feedback I got from him, but was to start with the lowest reasonable limit that made sense within reason, because you can always expand it. That's very easy to do in a backwards compatible way. it's much harder to tighten up validation after the fact. Like you can't go from a max items of 8 to a max items of 4 because you're going to break some user that was already up against that limit.
So because I remember we had to deal with this in previously, I think, for Ingress. So you can always expand it, because even if your cluster got upgraded, someone created one that was the bigger value, it got stored. Let's say you roll back. When you pull it through, it's still okay. Like that is still okay?
So I mean, CRD validation is pretty weak to begin with, right? I mean, it whatever. But what this requires is if we upgrade, if we increase the limits in the future, we would have to make that part of a new API release, and versions would have to explicitly support that API. That's my understanding of it. For GA type stuff, for K/case type stuff, we often add an extra layer of conversion in there, where in one release you can set a longer limit for new resources. There's an extra intermediate release in between. I don't think that's needed. We're still in alpha, but the important thing was having an upper limit, and having that upper limit something that was unlikely to decrease.
Right. Okay, maybe my complaint is that some of them are really small.
Yeah, and that's fine. Conditions, this was a relatively low number, I'll agree. I think we had some level of consensus on it in a previous meeting, but I agree, it's on the low side. But if our condition pattern is such that you have 5 possible conditions and you can only set 1 per condition type, then we already have 3 more than you could possibly set with our current API.
Yeah, and to add to that, in some places, like conditions is a good example. If you have more than 8 conditions, for the end user experience is not too good. You want to limit that. So that's one reason to have smaller limits, is making sure that if users are using a certain field or a certain config, and if they're trying to abuse it, or they're being very creative with it, and there is a use case that we didn't account for, right? So that's where we're trying to start small. And if somebody complains, then we talk to them about, okay, is this something that makes sense? If it does not, and that's how we can define some guidance as well going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I do agree with the fact that we should limit everything. We should just be very careful about just not making it like way too small.
Yeah.
And
No,
that was what I was wondering about, is that when we carry this over to beta GA, it will definitely become an issue where changing the limit you can't just do it in one release.
yeah, that's a little bit interesting. We'll have to see, but I think for alpha, at least, I'd rather start small and see where we run into issues, and not just assume that this is going to be too small of an issue, especially with conditions. Like more than 8 conditions on a resource seems like maybe not ideal. But I don't know.
To Boi's question, I have a question, maybe spending too much time here, but you can't change the number of like the max item on a field without a release. Maybe that's true for K/K, but custom resources, even after V1, like GA, they keep on adding new fields, right? I mean, that's true for even core Kubernetes resources as well. But why is that considered a breaking change? Like increasing a max item 16, like.
That is a great question, and one of the things Kubernetes has that we don't have, and that is a distinction between releases and API versions. So what happens, so this kind of change would happen through multiple Kubernetes minor releases, but you might not need to change the API version. you would just kind of gate it in one and then gradually let that capability get added in. Similar with new fields. We don't have quite the same model here, so I'm not sure what that looks like. And we have multiple implementations. If we had a single implementation, that would just be multiple releases of that implementation. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
Is there another project to reference that is doing something similar like us, where we have an API outside K/K?
There's lots of APIs outside K/K. There seems to be relatively few that are trying to do what we're doing, which is API outside K/K used by lots of different implementations. I know they exist, and we should try and learn from them. But I don't have any great examples right now.
Okay, if anyone finds them, please post in Slack.
Yeah,
might be very
definitely. Cool. Well, I know we've gone over time, but thanks everyone for the great feedback here, and we'll talk to y'all tomorrow.